You stood down in 2019. Do you miss it?
No, I found it pretty brutal. I mean, you, I know, were very interested at one point in your life in going in. I wonder what you would have felt. I felt after 10 years. So I was actually had lunch with a colleague today, a member of Parliament, who was saying, talking about, why did you leave and protest against Boris and Brexit? And I, for the first time, realised that in some way, actually my anger against Boris was quite helpful for me, because I was so angry with politics in general that I was quite grateful to have a great cause to go out on.
But so there's no aspect of it that you missed that would actually make you think, well, maybe at some point, if the circumstances were right, I might go back into it.
I used to be sort of coy about that question. I think I'm now increasingly clear in my mind I don't like it. I used to sort of be flattered into it, and people would say it, and I thought, I'd leave the options open. At one point, I thought very seriously about running to be a mayor in Cumbria, because I do love Cumbria. That makes sense to me. I thought about running to be mayor in London, because I think devolved, local, more granular politics is more meaningful to me than Parliament. But the honest truth is, it is brutal. And I feel a bit like sometimes I don't know whether you've interviewed social workers or probation officers who go in very idealistic, and then after about 10 years they're just exhausted. And people say to them, yeah, but you're doing such great work. It's thank goodness for you. Got to keep going. We need people like you. And they're just like, thank you. This is enough already.
I think there are a lot of people that go into politics, not just national politics, but local politics too, where you go in thinking that you can make a difference. And in many ways you can. You are in a position. I mean, sometimes people say to me, oh, you've got far more influence doing what you do than a backbencher has. And I can influence things at the margins, but I can't change anything. You actually have to be a member of Parliament to really pull the levers of power to change things.
Yes and no. I mean, it's very difficult. I mean, I felt as a backbencher for 5 years that I really did nothing. I mean, I rebelled on the House of Lords, and maybe I changed that policy with 120 other people. But even as a minister, until I became a Secretary of State very briefly in the Cabinet, junior ministers, pretty unclear. A lot of it is centred in number 10. I mean, there's a lot of your time is spent...
Even more so now, I think.
Yeah, and even more so now. And if I think about the things that book's about, the things I really cared about, where I felt I could make a difference. And I remember I was the Minister for the Environment and Rural Affairs, so I'm responsible basically for the lives of people in my constituency. And I remember my wife saying to me one day, I was saying, guys, it's so tragic. All these farms are closing, the dry stone walls are crumbling, the wilderness is taking over. And she said, for goodness sake, you're the minister. Can't you do something about it?
Have you ever read Chris Mullin's diaries? He was, for our listeners, he was a Labour MP, considered quite left-wing, but Tony Blair put him in his government, and he was a minister, I think, variously I think he was in the Foreign Office at one point, and was it the Department of Transport, Environment, something like that. And when you read his diaries, it's as if he's looking in on it rather than actually being part of it.
Yeah.
And I remember at several points, and I've said this to his face, at several points I wanted to wring his neck, because I'm thinking, you were there, you could have done something about this.
I agree. I like Chris Wallace, but I felt that. I mean, I read it before I went into politics, and I just thought, this guy isn't gripping it. He's not taking responsibility. He's not running it. But now I'm much more sympathetic towards him. I can now understand. I was a bit harsh. I thought, this guy obviously is a writer rather than a doer. But I now think in some ways Chris Mullins is just slightly more vulnerable, open and honest. And most political memoirs are an exercise in bluff. They're taking credit for things that probably, I could write a memoir where I said, and it's true, I introduced the plastic bag tax. I did. But what does that really mean? It means I signed the bill, 10 years of work preceded me. There were lots of moving parts of other people. I could say I brought down violence in prisons, but what does that really mean? It wasn't me that brought down violence in prisons. It's prison officers and prison governors who brought down violence in prisons. So this question of certain people at certain moments, particularly when they're Prime Minister or Chancellor, can genuinely say, if you're Margaret Thatcher, if you're Tony Blair, maybe even if you're George Osborne, you can say, yeah, I really did that. But it's a loss of the other stuff. I mean, one of the saddest things when I was leaving Parliament is these valedictory speeches where you're in the House of Commons hearing backbenchers who've been in the House talk after 30, 40 years about what they've done. And I'm afraid a great number of them were speeches in which people would say, my proudest moment is Labour MP. I campaigned to save my local coal mine that was going to close in 1983. And yes, it eventually closed in 1991, but I'm incredibly proud of the fight that we did. And you think, it's a strange story, right? You stopped this thing in 83, it closed in 91, or someone else will stand up and said, I got the lift in the station. And you think, and then a lot of the rest of the speech is affection for their staff, or the staff in the House of Commons, but it's not exactly what we mean by getting stuff done, a lot of this. Yeah.
Your last book, Politics on the Edge, which was a massive bestseller, and I think it partly because you were very honest about the frustrations that you felt in the various jobs that you had, it reminded me in a way of a book that I published in 2000 by Gillian Shepherd, who had risen, she'd started off as a parish councillor, had risen through the ranks to become Education Secretary in the Major Cabinet. And her central theme of this book was that power lay at the level above the one that she was in. And she always thought, oh no, if I do that, I'll get there and I'll be able to really do stuff. And she said she got to the cabinet and she realised, of course, the ultimate power is not with the Secretary of State. It is partly with the Treasury, but predominantly with Number 10 and the Prime Minister. And that's exactly how you felt,
exactly
wasn't it?
How I feel. And it's very interesting, as you say, that you published a book that was saying this so long ago, because she was, as you say, a minister in sort of
It was called Shepherd's Watch, which was a book title I was very proud of.
That's very good. It's lovely. Very, very good. Shepherds wash their socks by night.
Exactly.
Yeah. But no, as you say, 30 years ago she's making this point. And of course it's got worse. Because actually, in many ways, John Major and Margaret Thatcher were still running quite traditional first among equal cabinets with big beasts who could make decisions. Once Blair came in, and my friend Alistair Campbell, it became very centralised on that famous sofa.
Yeah.
And by the time you were through to, this government we have now, Keir Starmer, or indeed, to be honest, most of the Conservative governments I served in, they copied Tony Blair. They inherited that system. They were not awfully interested in kind of empowering the junior minister to do stuff. It was the grid, the Number 10 message. And the problem with that is that government, to work well, involves doing thousands of little things. But if you centralise it all, you end up with them saying the story of the week is this. This week we're doing free school meals. Next week we're doing waiting lists in hospitals. And if you're coming and saying, actually, there's a really good opportunity for us to plant 100 million more trees in Britain, and I could do it, and it won't cost very much, and I can work with the farmers to do it. The answer is, well, that's not on the grid. And we don't want a minister going out in the media saying he's planting 100 million more trees, because we're trying to land this story about free school meals. And it gums up the whole system.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Text here from Patricia. Iain, please let Rory Stewart know how loved he is. What a shame politics lost him. We wouldn't be in a mess if most were like him. Now, obviously, it's very flattering when people say it, and I suspect when you do your live events with Alistair around the country, I suspect half the questions are sort of, well, why can't you two run the country? That sort of thing.
And presumably you get a bit of that too.
Not as much. But does that not sort of make you think, well, should I really sit this out? Should I not? Look, the country needs good people in Parliament. And at the moment, there are good people in Parliament, but there are far too many that possibly aren't there for the right reasons, or actually haven't got the vision, the capability of running things.
Yes, firstly, I'm very grateful, but I think it's also important to understand that politics is about a lot more than whatever this kind listener thinks I've got. And there are certain political skills I don't really have. I'm not particularly good at the media management side of it. I don't have very kind of party political instincts. I haven't been a member of the Conservative Party now for 6 years. Right? I'm very much an independent. And a lot of the business of politics is about...
Do you still describe yourself as a Conservative?
I'm on that side of the spectrum. I don't know whether that's a small C or a medium-sized C. I believe in business. I believe in a small state. I believe in trying to keep taxation under control. I think that entrepreneurs are what generate wealth. I think the problem with this government, I'm afraid, is that they're not great on growth and business. But in many other ways, I think like many people in the country, my heart is with the Labour Party, my head is with the Conservatives.